Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Today is August 13th, 2024. We are having a city council meeting here at City Hall. And if I can ask everyone to stand up for a pledge of allegiance. Thank you. Madam City Clerk, if you can take the roll.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and council members. Councilmember Andrews.
Present.
Councilmember Bonilla Jr.
Present.
Councilmember Goldstein.
Present.
Councilmember Roach.
Present.
Councilmember Syrup.
Present.
Councilmember Cermeño. Mayor Salinas.
Present, thank you. And it's also good to see you without the plastic. We're back. We are back. Next is public comments. This is limited to items only on the agenda. Let me see. Is there anybody that would like to make a public? Hold on. Is there anybody that would like to make a public comment? Seeing no one online. We do have one public commenter online, and I'll go to them right now. Alice, is it Robinson? Alice Robinson.
Hello. Hello, my name is Dave Robinson. I'm using my wife's iPad, and I am 2,000 miles away. I'm usually a few hundred yards away. I have a couple of slides that I prepared in the packet that was sent out. It's slides about 31 to 36. I'm not sure if it's possible to look at those on the fly here, but I will just make some comments about the context of those slides. So I think it's slide 32. On that slide, I present a map that has accomplished a goal that is part of what we're trying to do with the California Voting Rights Act. So that act was written for the purpose of making it possible for certain protected groups to elect a candidate of their choice. And one way to do that is to draw single-member districts where that group is going to have a majority of the voting population. And I was able to do that in 2 districts. So on that map, there's a District 2 and a District 4 that can elect a majority Latino, majority Asian candidate, or those voters can elect a candidate of their choice. The problem with this map is that in order to do that, I had to string together a lot of neighborhoods that were identified on Charles Purvis's maps of majority Asian and Latino voters, and I had to connect them all together through like paths along highways and industrial parks and so on. So it ends up being sort of looking fairly gerrymandered. And if you fast forward to the Fair Maps Act, that act has a whole bunch of provisions in it that are constraints on what you can draw for your map, and I'm not sure that it would be legal to have this map. According to the Fair Maps Act. Now, on the next slide, which I think is 33 maybe, I have a map that I've drawn that has multi-member districts. And so this doesn't sound very legal, but there is actually a legal way to do it. There's a line in the California Voting Rights Act that allows you to have a court settlement, which is what the city has already done. If we wanted to do this, we'd have to amend the court settlement. But in that settlement, we would have multi-member districts and elect 2 people in each district by ranked choice voting. And if you do that, you can actually elect candidates of those protected groups' choice in not just 1, but 2. So we could actually have 4 candidates who would be elected by those protected groups. So really, this is an excellent solution from the point of the California Voting Rights Act. That act was passed decades ago, and it didn't really anticipate this possible solution, but it recently became possible when the California Secretary of State certified this method. And this method is allowed through that process of amending or writing a settlement and getting it approved by a court. There's a line in the California Voting Rights Act allowing us to do that. And then I think like on slide 36, I just wanted to show what happened in Fremont when they adopted single-member districts. So that's what they did a few years ago in response to a California Voting Rights Act claim that Latino voters were not getting the representation they deserved. So their map is shown in that slide in the lower left. They drew very compact districts. And then the results are shown on the right side. So they did similar to what Hayward is shooting for, which is an at-large mayor and then a city council elected from single-member districts. And you can see from that those results, if you can find that slide, that's there as a trade-off between having a really strong mandate behind a candidate and just having a lot of vote splitting so that it's really unclear somebody wins without getting a majority of the vote. Since the elections are staggered, there are different numbers of voters who constitute a majority. And so the results are kind of indecisive or inconclusive, and they don't really produce a strong mandate for the candidates. And I can't really tell from this whether this actually accomplished the goal of helping Latino voters elect the candidate of their choice. So that's part of what's motivating this presentation is that I find the single member districts to be rather unsatisfactory. I think if we go with them, it would be probably okay. But if we wanted to do a better job, we could adopt this ranked choice voting method, and it would really set a strong precedent for further cities who address this California voting rights act issue. But somebody's already done this already. The city of Albany, which is in the northern end of Alameda County, has adopted multi-member district ranked choice voting. Actually, they're doing at-large ranked choice voting. And so they've done a really good job with that so far. They had a great election in 2022. They have another one coming up here where their entire board will be elected by that method. And so I also want to just note that that this method of district multi-member district ranked choice voting does clear the city of the California Voting Rights Act provision where you're targeting cities that have at-large elections. So we would be clear from that, except for the fact that the mayor is elected at large. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And seeing that you are the last speaker and there are no speakers here in the chamber, I'd like to close public comment and go straight to our public hearing. We only have one item on the agenda, and the public hearing number 3, to receive input from the community on city council districts to be established for district-based elections beginning in 2026 and provide initial direction to demographer regarding draft maps. And so I believe I'll kick this off to the interim city manager first, and then we'll pass it over to our esteemed demographer.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Happy to be here this evening for this conversation. As you all know, we kicked this journey off early this spring and have engaged the community on numerous occasions to try to get us to the maps that we will bring back to Council for their consideration in October. For approval in October, consideration next month. We have with us Karen McDonald. She is our demographer and has been doing an amazing job engaging the community in workshops, trying to get them to identify their communities of interest. And she has a presentation for us here this evening and can answer any questions. Myself and the city attorney and city clerk are here as well. So, Karen, take us away.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, and members of the staff. Thank you for having me. I'm actually here with my colleague, Stephen Ochoa, who is joining us remotely from Los Angeles, live. And I have a little presentation for you that includes a lot of maps. So while there are a lot of slides, fear not, this will go pretty quickly. Okay, so here's a little overview. I would like to show you the communities of interest that have been submitted so far in the process. We had some online submissions from Drumai CA Community, which is an online portal at UC Berkeley. We had some via a web form. Then there were some community of interest shapes that were submitted at a downtown pop-up fair event on 7/18. And then we had the public workshop on 7/9/24, and that was a really fun event. I think it was pretty well received. I certainly had a good time. And we worked with members of the public, and I will show you some of the submissions that came out of that workshop. Then secondly, we'll go through public plan submissions. So what we call plans in redistricting is basically just a map with districts rather than communities of interest. There are some complete maps and some single districts, and I will actually show you the couple of maps that the caller earlier referred to, in case you didn't have time to pull those up in the documents you had available. And then third, if there are any questions, I'm certainly here to answer those as best as I can. And then finally, if we could get some guidance and directions for the draft maps, we would be very appreciative, because as you know, we're at that stage now in the process where Stephen and I need to really look at the software and then take whatever input you will give us, whatever direction you give us, and then pull that together. And then the next time we see each other, you will have some draft maps to look at and give us some further feedback on, and then hopefully we can create the best map possible under a tight timeline for the city of Hayward. I should say at this point that Stephen, my colleague, is here, so when I'm done with this presentation, as you perhaps start deliberating on directions you might want to give, or if you'd like to see some of these communities of interest in a little bit more detail, Stephen can share a map and he can zoom in on all of this, and that also goes for the plans that have been submitted. So with that, just to remind everybody of the timeline and meetings, and I constructed this PowerPoint with an eye on it being a resource for people that perhaps are not here and perhaps don't want to just go through the website to pull all these resources together. So this could be printed out, and then you have some of the most essential items to get us to the next step of the process just easily at your fingertips. So here's your timeline in the meetings, and of course you know all about that. And on August 27, we need to post draft maps. So on August 19 is going to be our deadline to submit communities of interest or any other maps to be considered in the draft maps. That doesn't mean you can't, members of the public can still submit communities of interest, but we need to cut it off at some point to be able to draw the draft maps. So the 19th is going to be our deadline for your communities of interest or other maps to be submitted to be considered in the drafting of those maps. Districting criteria, just to remind everyone, and I'm grateful to the caller for pointing out a couple of things that I also wanted to highlight. We have 5 basic ranked criteria, so you see them right here. They are, of course, equal population, and then there's compliance with the Federal Voting Rights Act, there's contiguity, districts in one piece, respect for neighborhoods and communities of interest. We have the neighborhoods, the official city council approved neighborhoods available on our map, so we can pull those up. And then, of course, communities of interest have been submitted to you and to us in the meetings. And then there's compactness, which means just keep an eye on what your district looks like. And your caller alluded to the fact that perhaps one of the maps that was submitted may look a little bit funny, and we can point that out. There's always a little bit more to the Voting Rights Act or any of these criteria really than you can put on a slide, or actually probably on 50 slides. And there's a couple of things to keep in mind, which is one, the constraint on the compliance with the Federal Voting Rights Act is that while you strive to comply, you also cannot use race as a predominant criterion. That is a Shaw line of cases, so you can't just look at race and then draw yourself a district without getting called on that by a court. And then finally, compactness, while this is our 5th rated, our lowest ranked criterion, and not necessarily one of my favorites, I have to say, it is still something that the courts look at when a plan is challenged. So if something looks kind of funny, then you have to explain. And as the caller explained, there may be something to that with respect to one of the maps. So we'll take a look at that in a little bit, and we'll see what you see. So let me go over the public input overview. We have 22 communities of interest, or COIs as I like to refer to them. Stephen calls them COIs, and no matter what you call them, it's the same thing. We have 22 of those that were submitted. We have six district map submissions. As you know, we're trying to draw 6 districts. And then we have 1 hybrid district multi-member map submission, and that is also what the caller earlier referred to. We also have 3 single district submissions, and I will show those to you. So let's go through this really quickly. The submission summary for the communities of interest is, again, we had 22. We got 4 of them via Draw My CA, Draw My California Community. 1 written community of interest without a map, which we digitized. So basically, it's now available for mapping. And we got 3 via the public workshop that was held on 7/9. And then 14 were submitted, and they were shapes that were submitted at the downtown pop-up fair event on 7/18. And if any of the members of the public that submitted any of these shapes at the downtown pop-up fair are listening to this, or are listening to this later, if you can give us a little bit more information about these communities of interest, these community of interest shapes, that would be fantastic. Generally, a community of interest is documented by having a shape, or, the boundaries, and then also a little bit of information. We don't have that for those 14, but we most certainly have the areas that people are interested in. And again, I will show those to you in a second. You can see all of these submissions at our website, maphayward.org, under the public comment section. And I would encourage everybody to take a look there. So let's just look at these shapes really quickly. I don't want to take too much time, because in particular, since you can do that via the website, and we want to get through this relatively expeditiously. So this is one that was created on Draw My California Community on 5/9/24, and there's a comment on it. We call this the Hazel Koi, and you see at the bottom that the creator of this community of interest has submitted a little bit of detail about it. The next one also came via Draw My CA Community, and there's also a comment here that the community is largely comprised of older homes and so forth. And again, this is available on the website. Then we have this third community of interest also via Draw My CA Community, and this one says we have a lot of walkability. It's probably a little bit more affluent and so forth. So you can see the comment that defines this community of interest at the bottom of this slide. And then finally, we have this one here that is about location and historic ambiance. So then we have one that is that we digitized, because it was submitted via the website. So the person who submitted this gave us the boundaries, and then we digitize it. So you see this one, and there's also a comment below that talks about topography and so forth. And this is what they all look like. You see that there is a little bit of color there on the northern end, and then we have this big one here on the eastern side of the city of Hayward. And this is just to show you where we received some input via Draw My CA Community and also via the website. So this is where we have some information from people about what they would like. But fear not, there is more. So these are the communities of interest shapes that were submitted at the pop-up fair on 7/18. And they are distinguished by different colors, and of course they're not very easily visible. Again, my colleague Stephen is here, and if you would like to see any of that zoomed in, we can do that after this PowerPoint. And here are some more. So and as you know, there were 14 of them, And really, this is just to give you an idea. I want to go back to this map where we had some input, okay? And there's a third one. So then at the public workshop on 7/9, we had 3 communities of interest that were identified. There were 2 single districts that were created. So basically, by single district, it was not community of interest, was actually community members getting together and just trying to draw a district that, you know, had the ideal population met. So it's just 2 single districts that are just floating in the city of Hayward that would have to be combined with more districts, obviously, to make a compliant map. At that workshop, we had some requests for information. We were asked to provide some socioeconomic data and some locations of fire stations, because we had one member of the public who thought that that was a really interesting, perhaps, item to look at is, you know, where are the fire stations in the city of Hayward, and just to look at the access to the fire stations, because that member of the public spoke to perhaps how quickly a response time could be. So we, thanks to our city attorney, got a map and a list of the fire stations, and we were able to digitize those also. And we made some maps with socioeconomic data, and those are also now available on the website. So let's look at these community of interest submissions via the public workshop. So you see 3 of these shapes. So these are the areas that people talked about. We have detail on why these are communities of interest, and that's also on the website. So this is the public single district submission. So this was a district that everybody worked on together. And again, we didn't draw an entire map. We just drew this one district, and then there was another one. And you see that 2.16%. It just basically means it's within the plus minus 5% deviation range. So it's the population equality for that one district is okay. And then here we have another one. That one is negative 4.28%. So that is the second district that was constructed at that meeting with the people that attended and had a pretty good time, I think, if I say so myself, working on a map. And that's how far we got at that meeting. So the socioeconomic maps, I'll show those to you really quickly. These are created using data from the Census Bureau, from the American Community Survey. This is a data set that spans 5 years of data collection. The American Community Survey collects data every month from about 300,000 households throughout the United States, and then they release a data set that spans 5 years of data collection and so forth. So this is what we used, and here are some socioeconomic data, and I will leave that to you to look at that later if you are interested in it. It's a reference to anybody who is interested in it, and again, these are on the website. So this is median household income, and of course, the darker color indicates that there's a higher median household income. And then there's per capita income, and again, a darker color means that there is a higher per capita. And then we have percent of total population living below the poverty level. So you see that it's broken down on the left, 20 to 25% is in the darker green shading. And then we have adults age 25 and over with a high school diploma or higher degree. And in this case, it's actually, the colors are actually reversed. So the 50 to 60% is the darker color, and the lighter color is 90 to 100%. So please refer to the legend when you're reading these maps. And this one here is percent renter-occupied housing units of total occupied housing units, and this is something that we heard about. There was some interest in the workshop by people that were very interested about looking at renters and just making sure that renters were, adequately involved in this process, and were also interested in data about renters. So this is about renter-occupied housing units, And again, the darker color indicates that you have a higher number of renters in those particular areas. And here are our fire stations. So here are your fire stations, and some of them you will see are actually outside of Hayward. So, but many of them are within the Hayward city boundaries. And if you are interested in taking any of that into consideration, we have those available, and we have them mapped. And they seem to be pretty nicely spread out throughout the city, and we can certainly look at that. So here are the submitted maps. This is map 1. That was submitted, and you see that this map is actually pretty perfectly populated. The districts, the numbers that are under the shaded districts, like for example, there's like the Eden district, is if it says it's negative 0.21%, that means it's negative 0.21% below the ideal population. And so all of these districts are within plus minus 5%, which is great. Thank you very much to the person who drew this map, and thank you to everybody who participated, really. So there is one map, and then I'm not going to go through this because that would really extend our presentation to beyond where you probably want to stay here tonight. But this, you can, of course, print this out and then refer to it later. This is basically your basic statistics about this map that you just saw. And it shows you your total population for each of the districts. It shows the deviation. So that's a deviation, means it's from the ideal population. So again, you take the total number of persons that were enumerated by the census as adjusted by the statewide database, and then you divide that by the number of districts, and then you have your ideal population. And this indicates that, for example, the northern district, the district that's called North or Downtown North, is 99 persons over the ideal population, and that would be 0.36% over the ideal population. It gives you the total citizen voting age population, so these are persons that are citizens and 18 and over. Doesn't mean that they're registered to vote, just means that they're citizens and over 18. And then it also tells you the persons that were registered as of November 2022, to give you an idea of how many registered voters are in that particular district. Then we have the percent Latino citizen voting age population, so CVAP stands for citizen voting age population. We have percent white, we have percent black, percent indigenous citizen voting age population, and then percent Asian citizen voting age population. And finally, it's percent Hawaiian and other Pacific Islander citizen voting age population. So that this is how we're going to present the demographics also for your draft maps. So this is what we did with these maps, because they are full maps. They cover the entire jurisdiction of the city of Hayward. Okay, so here is our map number 2, and we have again demographics for map number 2. You can see that the shapes are, of course, a little bit different than from, you can give 20 or 200 or maybe 500 people the same job to draw a map, and they may all be slightly different, even if it's a relatively small jurisdiction that they're drawing with. So this is another map that was submitted, and again, here is your demographics slide if you would like to see some detail. And again, the person who drew this map did pretty good on the deviation. They are pretty close. Nothing goes over plus minus 5%, over or under 5%, so doing good on that one. And then we have a third map submission, and again, we have some demographics for you on the next slide for your reference. Our fourth map submission, this is, I believe, the map that the caller referred to. You can see that the blue district reaches just a little bit. Compact is not the first thing that comes to mind looking at this map. And thank you, though, so much for providing this map to us. And when you look at the demographics, you will see that that blue district, in fact, has 51.8% Asian citizen voting age population. So thank you for participating. Again, one more look at that map and that blue district, that is District 1. And here we go. And this is another district submission that we received. Again, just a different approach to our districting puzzle. And again, this is the demographics. This particular submission, again, did pretty well, is within plus minus 5% of total deviation. And then we have number 6, the 6th submission here. And it's amazing how much variation you can see here. And again, this one did very well within plus minus 5%. And thank you everybody for listening to the criteria and the first presentation that we gave. So here we have a single district submission that was also submitted. And this is just, pretty much covers downtown, obviously, pretty much in the center of Hayward. And it's negative 4.39%. And then we have one public submission. This one here was also mentioned by the caller earlier. It has 3 districts, and the idea here is that this would be 3 multi-member districts. Okay? All right. So now that I have really flown through this presentation, if you have any questions, I would be very happy to answer them if I can. And if I can't, then I'm sure Stephen is going to help me. And again, to remind you, Stephen can pull up a map of anything that I've shown you or anything you want to see. So if you'd like to just, look at something in more detail, we can do that. And what we would really appreciate is if you could give us some guidance and input for the draft maps, because, after this meeting and in a few days, just looking at whether there's more public input, we have to go back and then just create some draft maps. And we'll publish those by 8/27, and then we'll present them at the next hearing on 9/3. And it'll be great. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate that. This is a public hearing, so before I call upon the council, I'll go to public comment, and let me see if there's any public comment. I do know the attorney who brought upon this issue in Hayward is here in the room or in the chamber, Mr. Scott Rafferty from Walnut Creek. Would you like to make your 15-minute public comment? Well, I have no public comment right now, and there's no one in the chamber that'd like to make a public comment, so your 15 minutes start now.
I'm sure we're all a little bit disappointed that we don't have more input physically and virtually today. But we did have some feedback from the public, and I think not unexpectedly, your demographer's done a masterful job in putting that together. I had a couple observations. 1 and 2 get to 44.5% Asian, which the way to really look at this, I think, is assuming that you get the turnout effects corrected and it stimulates Asian turnout, which it usually does. So that's more like 5.5% from majority. So you have to get 5.5% of crossover voters. The reason I state it like this is you might think that the difference between 41.5 and 44.5 isn't much, but it really is, because it's really a difference between 5.5 and 8.5, and that's a lot. So I would take more seriously working on maps 1 and 2 than 3 and 5. And there is some, I would think of the Asian community as being kind of a priority community of interest, but it's not the only community of interest. So in its area, it deserves perhaps priority over neighborhoods to some degree. Elsewhere, you know, I don't think you need to think so much about race and think more about neighborhoods and socioeconomics. And I'm very grateful that you're looking at renters, family income. Those are very important communities of interest because they often correlate with obstacles to people coming to meetings like this, and unfortunately they correlate to people not voting. So having a community leader there, community leaders running for election, certainly in San Ramon, it's been, and really throughout Contra Costa County, it's been transformative, and that's the intent of the law. Now, so maps 3 and 5 don't do such a great job in the Asian community, so perhaps there are positive features elsewhere in the city could be mapped onto that. Map 4 is what I would call a demonstration map. It shows that you can have a majority Asian district, but a very, I want to use a polite word here, but it's a bit contorted. So it's not a realistic, you know, it may establish liability, but that doesn't matter because you're going to districts. I mean, I hope you're going to districts. So we're not worried about federal liability. I think we're taking care of that by creating a strong influence district. So, I mean, I appreciate the value. I mean, he's kind of proven me wrong because I thought when we went to 6 districts that it was a bit of a fool's errand to think about a majority district. He's shown that it's possible, so thanks for that. But you still, to be, first of all, constitutionally, you can't look just at race. You can't make it the priority feature. So I think I'm maybe arguing to the choir here, but as it stands, map 4, although it is a demonstration, it's not a plausible remedy. Also, to be effective, even an Asian district has to be congruent with neighborhoods because that's how political organization happens. So that's very important. I was interested in, I think, map 2. I may be confusing them, but used part of, connected Mount Eden and went over and to Mission Boulevard and kind of cut through. I guess Fairway Park is on both sides of Mission Boulevard, but that area between Mission Boulevard and Mount Eden is largely pretty Asian rich, and that it looks like, in our view of what HARD should do, that looks very much like the basis of their district, the boundaries that we would suggest to get to a larger population than you need to get to. So that was interesting. It's nice if the Asian district is somewhat congruent with the school district and HARD, because then you can perhaps have the community nominate a slate, or it just makes it easier for them to organize. Outside the, I mean, my personal perspective is outside the remedial district, it's less important because a city is different than a school district, is different than a recreational district. So if you have a community of interest that you think is important for your mission, I wouldn't place too much emphasis on what the school or district or HARD is doing. The reverse isn't true, because the law points out that being a city is also kind of a super community of interest, and it encourages other districts to follow, and this is a very big issue in the school district. The unincorporated area wants its own representative, which they can't quite have because they don't have enough population, but that has been a very loud and clear message. So, so that would be some guidance. I think you're getting some feedback on neighborhoods. I was somewhat surprised in HARD they had a map of neighborhoods, and I'd been kind of looking for sort of the definitive division of Hayward into neighborhoods and hadn't found it. So perhaps you have a good source for that, but I think that would be a very important ingredient in this mix. So I think you have two maps, and I'm not quite sure. These are public submissions, so this is based on the public input. I don't know if the council is going to have official maps that are kind of driven by Karen's, the demographer's thinking, Ms. McDonald. But I think you're off to a good start on that front. So those would be my main concerns. I guess we're done with workshops, but if there's another workshop, it would be nice if it were in the Asian community. But I know from experience with the other jurisdictions, it's hard to get a lot of turnout. So I appreciate what Karen did at this street fair. That was a creative way to overcome that. So I think we're on course. I mean, I can't say I'm thrilled, and I hope you're not thrilled that more people didn't show up. So anything that can make it easier. It is a little concerning that I guess the deadline for maps is next Monday, which I think is a little earlier than it has to be. I mean, if there's any way, given that we haven't gotten a flood of input from the community, if that could be extended, I'm going to talk to my client. I think we may have the foundation. It's not always useful for me to come in with the plaintiff's map. That's I'd rather find utility in what the public has to offer. So I'm, as you know, I realize I'm not your favorite person, but if you have any questions, I'm very much at your service. And I appreciate your commitment to making this happen. I've heard your reservations. I know it's a hardship, but I think it'll have long-term benefits to the city, and it will avoid having litigation by somebody else. And I'll try to take it, the remainder of the process, be as constructive as I can and making it work for everyone. So I don't know if it's a public hearing, so I guess if you're so inclined, you can ask me questions, but I don't have much else to say at this point.
Okay, thank you. So seeing no one else in the chamber, I don't have any cards, no one else online, I'll return up here. Council members or menu?
Mayor, thank you, and thank you very much for a good presentation. I do have a couple of questions. And were you also looking for a preference, perhaps, from us? Were you looking for a preference or rating of some sort?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much for that question. If we could get some direction from you.
Okay.
We do have some maps, as
All right.
Mr. Rafferty just said, but they were submitted before we had the communities of
Got it.
interest input.
So some clarification. So let's see, single district and 3 districts, those are out, right? Because they're not good for us. Those are gone, right? There's a single district and the 3 districts. We shouldn't even discuss them.
The single districts, we could potentially, if you like what you see, you could give us direction to take a
Okay.
look at that and see if it could be in some fashion incorporated.
Okay, got it. I don't like them. All right. Number 6, map number 6 is not compact. So in my mind, as for compactness, one of the prerequisites or requirements or suggestions, and that one's out. Map number 4 is gerrymandering. True?
Let me pull it up
All right.
to make sure that I know
So in
which
my
map
mind,
you're
that one's
talking
out.
about. Yeah.
Okay.
Map number 4. Well, it is not a compact map.
All right, so that one's
Yes.
out. All right. If one of the directions that I heard when we were speaking about this is that we are not supposed to be making decisions on ethnicity or ethnic qualities or presence, then why are we discussing Asian presence in some of these districts? I don't understand why, if we're not supposed to be dealing with ethnicity in these districts. Can you explain that, or are we just talking without needing to talk?
Yes, thank you for that question. So you don't want to use race predominantly, so that shouldn't be your only criterion. And that is partially why we have other data sources. We have a layer, or we have all of the official neighborhoods, for example. And as you know, one of our criteria is also to keep neighborhoods together as much as possible.
Okay.
So, for example, we have communities of interest that were submitted. So, we're supposed to keep those together for the most part. We have some socioeconomic data. So we have other factors. And even when you're looking at just complying with Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, the Federal Voting Rights Act, you also, when you're drawing, look at all of these other data sources and use them together so that you're not running afoul of that criterion to not use race as a predominant criterion. You can absolutely look at race, and you should look at race, just not only.
Yeah, the public speaker kept saying that we needed 44% Asian presence, so that's why I asked that question. Okay. Also, HUSD and HART are also going through the same process. Are there benefits to more or less having district lines as per their districts, or should we just stay away?
If you call the Register of Voters, they tell you they would love that. But if you ask me, your consultant, I will tell you that the boundaries are different. The outer boundaries are already different for the jurisdiction. So essentially, your districts, your individual districts are going to look different. So there's really not much sense. And also, the issues that you deal with are different from the issues that HUSD, for example, is dealing with. So your communities of interest are going to be slightly different. People that come to the meetings even are different, right? Even though they, of course, all live together in the same neighborhoods. So I personally am not a fan of looking at other jurisdictional boundaries.
Very good. It's our city, so it should be our boundaries. All right, so thank you. As far as preference, I go with map 3, first choice, and map 5, second choice. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councilmember Roach.
Thank you. Yeah, and just to follow up on Councilmember Zemania's questions, so I understand the point of creating, a predominantly or a majority Asian district, but no other race in the city gets the same treatment as 44% if you look at all the districts. And so I'm just wondering, are we trying to get, we're not supposed to talk race. It's obviously the predominant argument for why we're redistricting. So then there is, maybe I'm wrong, but I guess just to answer that, if we're not supposed to consider race in the criteria, that's not one of the criteria, and our majority population in Hayward is not even represented in those numbers as they are in the population at large within any one district, how are we supposed to, how do we handle that?
Okay, so thank you, first of all, for that question, or for that set of questions. Let me clarify that you don't have to pick from any of the maps that were submitted.
Right, no, I understand. I'm just because they're representative, I'm asking the question on the representation. Yeah.
Right. So I think what we will end up doing is we will just take your input and your directions, and then we're going to construct some draft maps for you, and we're going to draft those maps to be in compliance with all of the criteria.
Sure, okay.
And Mr. Rafferty, of course, is correct that we do not want to disenfranchise a protected minority group. We have more than one protected minority groups.
I think that's what I'm getting at.
Exactly. So we will keep an eye on all of them, even though other minority groups may not have given rise to this particular situation that we're gathered here to discuss. But we will keep an eye on all of that and take into consideration the communities of interest that were submitted to see what we can construct for you.
Because looking at the representative maps, and we are in a way disenfranchising the Latino vote in Hayward, because right now it's 40% plus, And in all of these situations, they're down to the 30%. And so, I mean, I'm really nervous about that, what that does in the situation. So I guess we need to look at that closely when we come up with these final numbers. Because in order to sort of, promote a representative community that needs sort of more representation, we're demoting, the majority minority in the city. And I think that's a big concern as we move forward. Okay, thank you. And then, so obviously something you'll work with us and how we keep track of that. Great. And then the other question I had was about just looking at some of the COIs. On slide 18, there's a COI submission that defines Fairway Park, and that's just something I'm familiar with since I live in that area. I think that sort of more clearly defines it. So I think it would be a real shame. I think like there was a speaker about Southgate, and I totally understand why she's trying to keep that together, because everybody identifies that area as a community. They belong to the club nearby, so it's a pretty defined community of interest. I think in Fairway Park, it's the same thing. They're all sort of, as it's defined in that that slide submission 18, that's pretty close to what the Fairway Park area looks like and the neighborhood looks like. And so my input is to make sure whatever district we look at, that representative of that COI is incorporated in those districts. Let's see, I think, and then just to get to the question again, does the settlement agreement or our charter preclude us from the creative questions about 3 districts with 2 candidates? I think that's a legal question for our city attorney. If you could clarify that for us.
So I'm going to defer to our outside counsel who is online.
Great.
And I think she's going to log on.
Hello, yes. This is Robin Johansson, and our settlement agreement provides for 6 districts and an at-large mayor, so that we would not be in a position, and our charter, we would not be in a position to change that number.
Okay, thank you. That answers my question. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Bonilla.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor. I had a few general questions. First, as we were looking at the maps, did you see kind of any general trends in many of the maps that you as the demographer, want to kind of call our attention to?
Thank you for that question. I did actually not look at the maps from that perspective, but again, my colleague Stephen is here and we could ask him. And also, as we're discussing some of these communities of interest, he could just pull them up if, Madam City Clerk, if we could please just get him to share his screen perhaps, and he can pop.
And the reason that I'm asking is because if we,
Yeah.
heard from several parts of the community that one particular community of interest kind of keeps reoccurring in these discussions or in these map drawings, it might be, incumbent on us to try to protect that community of interest if we've, heard from many parts of the community that particular part needs to stay together.
Yeah, if I may, if that could perhaps be your guidance to just look at these communities of interest that were submitted and then try to keep them together as much as possible. And also with respect to the previous question about race and ethnicity and perhaps keeping other racial minority groups together, that could also be a point of guidance that you give us today to keep an eye on that and just make sure that whatever we present to you incorporates racial fairness.
Excellent. I think both of those would be something that I'm very interested in, especially as we were kind of talking about some of these maps really sort of diluting the Latino vote in Hayward. So I think what you just suggested is something that's a priority for me, and I think we'll hear it from the rest of my colleagues as we hear some of their feedback. And then also I do agree that, map 5 doesn't necessarily demonstrate, or actually map 4 doesn't demonstrate the compactness that I think we're looking for in the map. So that's probably not one of my, preferences. But what I was looking at when I was looking at submission 2 is what is that line, what street is that kind of that green district for ending in and that purple district starting? Is that like Tennyson or industrial?
I'm going to ask Stephen to zoom in and let us know the answer to that question, please.
Excellent.
Let me change the colors to make things look slightly better.
Mr. Ochoa, we're having a hard time hearing you.
Testing.
We hear you, but the sound quality on your headphones is very
Testing. That better?
a little better.
Is that better?
Yes.
A little better, yes.
That better?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, it sound better.
Okay. All right. It's called adjusting your setting when you plug in the wired headphone. All right. So the question was in the second map 2, what were the boundaries between districts 3 and 4?
District 4 and 6.
4 and 6.
It's
There
at
we
238 where it bumps up against Mission. I'm just wondering what that dividing line is. Is that in district?
Right. So it goes down Mission, and then here is Garin
Oh, it's
Avenue.
Garin. There it is. All right, that's what I was wondering.
Okay. And then it looks like this little bit is Folsom Avenue, and this little bit, I'm guessing that is the BART.
I see.
Does that answer your question? And up to Tennyson.
That did. So, map 1 and 2, seem to be the most logical to me, and kind of keeping some of our communities together, especially when you overlay that with our communities of interest. So, I think my direction is when we see the next set of maps, let's see how we keep the Latino vote together and don't necessarily dilute it the way that we're seeing here, and then also just I think keeping in mind kind of that compactness when we're looking at some of these communities, which for me takes map 5 out, would be my guidance. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Syrup.
Thank you. Just to clarify your last comment, Councilmember Bonilla.
Excuse me, Councilmember Syrup. Mr. Ochoa, you have your hand up.
Yeah. Thank you. Now that I've had the chance to say hello to everyone, I just a guidance question, and for the members that also spoke previously, if you are liking these public submissions maps, if you can tell me which specific if there are specific parts you actually are focused on, or general architecture, that would be helpful to me as well. If you're so I can get a sense of what you like about them, so I can focus on those types of issues. Thank you.
Thank you, and I apologize, Councilmember Syrup.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify my colleague's last comment. You said that map 5 doesn't have the appropriate compactness, but do you mean map 4?
Yep, I meant map 4.
Okay, just wanted to clarify that for the record. I agree with that as well. I think map 4 is very creative, but doesn't meet the needs we're looking for. I'll try to keep my comments short and just give very specific direction. I think maps 1 and 5 of these submissions make the most sense to me as to how we might divide up the community. I'm wondering if we can pull up map 1, and I'll give some comments on how I think it may be able to be adjusted.
So this is map 1.
Great, thank you. Is it possible to increase the contrast between these colors a little bit?
Sure. Ooh, too bright. Is that enough contrast to see district lines for you?
Yes, thank you. So the direction I'd like to give in regards to this map, and I think similar thoughts would apply to map 5 as well, is what I do like about this is the structure of the downtown. As someone that's familiar with the downtown area myself, I think it makes sense. I do think, and I believe one of the submissions from the community workshop was a community of interest that kind of encompasses from Mission Boulevard into the Highlands towards the university. I think the submission goes quite high into the Highlands, but I do see some of the neighborhoods along Mission having more in common with maybe the Triangle in this regard. So yeah, if you go down Mission Boulevard, just north of the Triangle.
Okay.
Yep, keep going, yeah. So yeah, this area in particular, maybe just south of Mission Garin, if you keep going down a bit further.
Sure, let me move the map.
Yep.
Okay, so here's Mission right here.
Yes, and so what I'm
sorry,
saying,
Mission's right over here.
correct, is I'm under the impression that some of these streets may have more in common with the Triangle or South neighborhoods than the hills as they're currently grouped into. And so that would be an adjustment I would want to see considered in a potential draft map. And then if we could zoom out a little bit.
Just for clarification, you are saying you believe Mission is a more appropriate order for anything paired with the kind of the Hyatt Hills and Cal State East Bay
Correct.
area.
Yeah, so
as
if you see
opposed to-
streets like Calhoun or the Mission foothills, I believe those neighborhoods that are the closest to Mission have more in common than with the Hayward, with the Triangle than with the current Hayward Highland district that's drawn.
Okay.
So that's a point of feedback. Is that clear?
Yes, Mission
Okay.
Boulevard, much better barrier or
Yeah.
border.
Could you zoom out a little bit? Okay, and then maybe centering the map again. I think the only other point of feedback I'd have here is I think these lines make sense. I would just want to make sure they incorporate some of the drawings that we saw on the map for different communities of interest, specifically within Triangle, the district that's blue next to it, and Eden. I think that's where we saw a lot of different submissions around communities of interest. Because those drawings were all at the neighborhood level, I'm not sure if those neighborhoods would be upset if they were separated from each other within a district, but just making absolutely sure that they're not being split in half down the middle, I think is my top priority. Otherwise, I think this makes sense. I guess a question I had for my colleague, Councilmember Roach, is I agree with the way that Fairway Park was drawn, but I'm curious if you see the industrial park south of it as part of the Fairway Park neighborhood too. And that's just a question I have because I'm not from that part of town. Yeah.
Thank you. I don't have any other questions from the day. Oh, Councilmember Andrews.
Yes, a lot of my colleagues have mentioned similar comments that I was going to make in terms of what they would like to see, particularly with map 4. But wanted to know if there's any way we can revisit the slides 22 through 26. It's more of a comment on presentation, if that's okay. Just on slide 22, is it possible where you can isolate the boundaries for Hayward where it doesn't show all the income levels all over the region, just so it's easier for folks to see who are trying to?
Actually, let me come in again. You were sorry, I don't have the PowerPoint up in front of me, so I don't know which slide is which yet. But I can overlay all of those demographic statistics with neighborhood boundaries. If you was that your question?
Yes, just if you can, for slides 22 through 26, just to isolate it so it's easier for the viewer. I understand if you want to show all the fire stations, but that was just something.
Give me a moment because this will make the computer
you don't have to
wheel.
do it real time, but
oh, sure. Oh,
just if you
that's
have
what
it
we're
as
here
a
for.
reference slide, it was just a comment.
That's how good they are.
I know. I see.
All right. Just for the sake of knowledge right now, these red dotted lines are the official Hayward neighborhood boundaries. So just I'm just going to do neighborhood boundaries. I think that was probably the best. And okay, and this particular variable second, while I just get ready for this. We're going to change.
While you're doing that, I have a question.
Sure thing.
Have you seen where maps are showing a cross-section of incomes instead of just areas as a point of interest? So I've heard that they would like to see a mix of incomes in a area versus just this area.
So you mean for, thank you for that question. May I just please clarify, are you talking about the final maps when we actually have some districts? Yeah, we did hear that from some of the members of the community that participated, so we can take a look at that also. I mean, honestly, we have a lot of different criteria. We have a lot of input. We have our neighborhood boundaries. We have socioeconomics. You know, we have racial fairness. We have compactness. We have contiguity. We have all of these things. So there's going to be a little bit of a mix, most likely. You know, something has to give, and we will give you more than just one draft map. So there's going to be some. You know, there's going to be some variation there, and you can select from those, and then we can keep working on them to get to a perfect map. So,
Okay, thank you.
Right. And just as an example, this right here is the per capita income variable. So basically, think of it this way: the darker the green, the more money they have per people.
Right.
So it's money per people. So you can see the lighter colors are kind of here in this Tennyson area. Jackson Triangle, you know, darker in the hills, I guess, as you go along Mission, just my observation. So that's one example by neighborhood. Is this, if this is okay, I can switch to a different variable.
Yeah, I was just wondering if the Hayward boundaries, if they can just isolate the Hayward boundaries, and it looks like maybe not. So that's fine.
I can work at it.
Okay.
That's a request.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Roach.
Thank you. I just wanted to get back to some of the input that I think Stephen was asking for, and also to answer Councilmember Syrop's question. Yeah, I mean, I do often think of industrial and south as the cutoff. So, but I can see why it's not there, because it looks like it sort of goes up into the hills, and there isn't a natural road boundary. But yeah, I mean, my input would be, like, honestly, the Hayward Park neighborhood is traditionally sort of industrial boulevard in south. So if there was a way to cut that up, you know, to look at that would be interesting. And then as far as input on the maps, I feel like the district submission 2 takes care of some of the question about, because I agree with the Mission Boulevard question, that is a pretty strong delineating line, you know, in that part of town. And map 2 sort of takes care of some of that. I can see how we'd want to bring in the north part, the north sort of east part, into what would be District 3. So maybe there's some merging, in my opinion, of District 1 and District 2 that could happen, because it does, the submission map number 2 does take in the Fairway Park. It goes along the Guerin line. I think the industrial park line would probably be more appropriate there. And then, yeah, so for me right now, I think 1 and 2 are kind of looking close. Some merging of those two, if that helps a lot. I just wanted to give some feedback on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Goldstein.
Yeah, thank you. Councilmember Syrop brought up an interesting point that I hadn't really considered, and that is on these maps. So I'm looking at map number 2, and the boundary between District 4 and District 6 goes up Guerin. And oops, I just hit the wrong button here. How did I do that? In any event, my point is, do we have to, in these maps, do we actually have to divide this side of the street from that side of the street? Because obviously the communities that go up the hill from the Treeview area are really more hill and probably have a slightly different perspective than the needs of the people that are a little bit, you know, further down the hill, like in the Treeview. So Treeview and Fairview might see themselves as a cohesive community versus the folks up Guerin and up into the hills might see themselves differently.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So we use census blocks, which is a geography that the Census Bureau defines to draw districts, because within a census block, we know what the total population number is, and that gives us then, you know, an accurate number when we're reporting our district population. And the Census Bureau uses center lines for streets to delineate census blocks. So yes, you do run into that issue where you have district boundaries basically that are dividing one side of the street from the other side of the street. If there is a neighborhood, of course, that encompasses both sides of the streets, then I would say we'll move the line over behind the neighborhood, and go onto the street one over or two or three, as the case may be.
I see. So what we're looking at is a best guess representation based on those blocks you're talking about, but in the actual formation of the district, we take those other considerations in view and make those districts cohesive.
Yes, so for the maps that were submitted or the plans that were submitted, that was, members of the public putting the lines where they are, and for the communities of interest that were submitted through Draw My CA Community, those were boundaries that people selected to define their communities, right? For the shapes from the street fair, which, by the way, I cannot take credit for, but thank you, Mr. Rafferty, I cannot take credit for the street fair. Those were more shapes that we had to interpret because they were colored in, with pencil, so we did the best that we could. So they may be a little bit off.
Okay. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing how you put this together, but these are, pretty interesting in the sense of how well some of these maps seem to embody the spirit of what we're after. So I'm highly encouraged by the process. Keep it up.
Thank you. And then Councilmember Bonilla.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, so my last comment is when we look at, I guess, proposed District 4 and 5, let's say in maps 1 or 2, can we just look at, when the maps come back, kind of the income between, those, and if there's an opportunity to maybe look at those lines based off of income? Because for an example, I do see part of, if you look at kind of District 2, I do see part of, if you look at map 2, I can see part of District 4, some parts of it may be aligning a little bit more closely with District 5, especially around the Mission Boulevard area. Because I'm not sure that the people who live kind of directly off of Mission, for an example, like on Belmont or on Del Mar or on those kind of, I'm not sure that they identify as the hills as much as they do the flatlands. So I think that Mission Boulevard is a clean dividing line. I'm just not sure that it's the right dividing line. So maybe we can just overlay, like income and a couple of the other, I would say, factors, just to make sure that Mission Boulevard and maybe District 5 and District 4, there might be a way of kind of just redrawing those lines a little bit so the communities might be able to stay together a little bit more based off of different things like education or income, because I kind of started to see a lot of discrepancies when within District 4 when it came to those things, where I think maybe pieces of it might be better aligned with other districts within this map. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ochoa, go right ahead.
Sorry, just to answer the council member's question, I will definitely look into that. I do want to add, just to highlight what Karin said earlier, the socioeconomic data is shaded at the census tract level, very big. So just note, so some of the colors you might bleed to one area. They may or may not it just might just be a large color shade. That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, just a couple comments. One is, for me, it's, and just so that you know, for me, it's a hard no for overlapping with the Park District, with the Hayward Area Park and Recreation District. It's also a hard no for me overlapping with the school district. And so I will be looking for that in the future. I think over the years, just up here on the council, and just as a advocate before I was on the council, we've always been real concerned about how a lot of the representation on a lot of the boards and bodies locally in the city have all come from the hills. And so I'm also very concerned that we have essentially segregated the hills. We have carved out the hills. And I thought maybe, as I was thinking about this process when we started it, that I thought that perhaps we would somehow parcel or partition the hills a bit more so that we could, folks in the Jackson Triangle would, be engaged with folks, in the Highlands, be engaged with folks in the Upper Highlands, and then and so forth. So, I'm surprised to that we're blocking them out the way we are. I always thought maybe we would go, east-west lines, but anyways, that just an observation. And the other, another point I wanted to make, and maybe the city attorney can answer this. Do we? I know we have 6 submissions. I'm sort of waiting until we see any other submissions in the coming days. But do we know why the plaintiff has not submitted their maps?
No, but Mr. Rafferty is here, and perhaps he can speak for himself and his client, the plaintiff.
So I'd like to ask you, Mr. Rafferty, you're from Walnut Creek, and your plaintiff has sued us, and just curious, how come you have not submitted your maps, and you're sort of waiting to the very end here?
First of all, let me defend my client and defend the civil rights laws of this country. Civil rights clients aren't limited to Hayward when they look for their attorney. There are not, to my knowledge, any attorneys in Hayward that practice voting rights law on a regular basis. So it's terribly offensive to say that because I live in Walnut Creek, I can't be hired to come here. It's the kind of racist comments that were made about attorneys from the Justice Department who desegregated the South. So you keep saying this, and it validates a concern about the intentionality of what you're proposing to do, and which is to split apart communities of interest, to blend high income and low income, high turnout and low turnout, so that you can perpetuate microcosms of the at-large system. And that's not a proper objective. As to how we'll respond to these maps, well, we have 6 days before the next deadline, and we will look at drawing our own maps. I think I've laid out the philosophies that we'll try to follow. We're listening very intently to the public, and we're listening to you. But we're going to try to maintain communities of interest. We're going to try to separate low propensity voters from high propensity voters. And I don't understand, and maybe you can clarify this for me, but you've complained, I think, about too many politicians getting elected from the hills, and yet you're suggesting that the hills be divided so that they could continue to dominate perhaps 2 districts with large minority low-income populations. So that's what the Fair Maps Act is designed to prevent.
But you didn't answer my question. How come Mr. Wu has not submitted his maps?
Because we are listening to the public, and we didn't submit a map in the school district because we were satisfied with one of the demographer's maps. But I'll take it under advisement because I'm listening closely, and I think there are things that can be improved in these maps. Since we're doing all 3 of these processes at once, we're learning a lot about demography and how people perceive neighborhoods, and we'll use that. I would like to have, if there is a canonical map of neighborhoods of Hayward that you all respect, it would be useful to have that. We have something similar in Hard. That would be very useful.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I appreciate that. My last comment is I'm waiting to see after all the maps are submitted before I really make any comments. But since, the comment was made about being offensive, a couple weeks ago, we just finished with the National Night Out event. And we had, over 30 National Night Out events all over the city. And so we were out there. I visited many of the neighborhoods out throughout the city. West Hayward, North Hayward, South Hayward, Jackson Triangle. And I spoke with a lot of community members, prominent community members, people who were engaged in the city for a very long time. And they did talk about this. They were curious about what we were doing and about this process and about, the emails that were being sent out and, the notifications that were being sent out. And quite frankly, they were offended. They were offended that we were being pressured into this process. And so, when we're talking about, a process that is offending a community, I think you're seeing this right here. So, with that said, I don't have any more questions from the council. Councilmember Cermeño.
Yeah. Thank you, and I support you in your comments.
Thank you. So I don't see any other comments or hands up here. I don't see any comments online. So with that, thank you very much for your work on this. You and your colleague have done some really good work. And I have seen you out at the street parties. Thank you. And Mr. Ochoa, thank you very much. And so I will close this item. And Mr. City Manager and Mr. City Attorney, I said 7 o'clock, right? And it is 6:55, and with no other business, meeting adjourned. Thank you.